Here's what's coming up on your horizon. Well, we've heard it before. As oil goes, so goes our state. And we're reminded of that every few years when a downturn in the oil patch starts to reverberate through the rest of the economy.
Energy jobs have already fallen considerably this year, and that has spilled over to the overall state employment picture. So employment in Oklahoma has been falling since February and now is about 0.5% below its peak. So if energy firms are planning further reductions in activity heading forward, that probably means fewer energy jobs that could spill over to other jobs.
Today, we'll look at the latest projections for Oklahoma's energy sector and see the impact it could have on jobs and state services. Stay with us for Oklahoma Horizon.
Oklahoma Horizon is made possible by the Oklahoma Department of Career and Technology Education.
Oklahoma's investment in career tech provides more than nationally recognized technology education and training. It produces solid financial returns for the state's economic future. Oklahoma Career Tech, elevating our economy.
And the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping good people grow good things. And now, from the Career Tech Studios in Stillwater, here's your host, Rob McClendon.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us here on Horizon. Well, for many Oklahomans, the current low prices at the pump are certainly welcome. And while we are paying some of the lowest prices in over a decade, those savings are coming at a cost to our overall economy. The energy sector in Oklahoma supports 1 in 5 jobs. And what that means for many Oklahoma families is job loss and reduced state services. Federal Reserve Bank does a quarterly energy survey, and what the latest shows is not much relief in sight. Chad Wilkerson is the Oklahoma City branch executive for the Federal Reserve Bank and visited us in studio. So Chad, what should we glean from the Fed's third quarter energy survey?
I think to some degree it was a little bit more of the same. So another decline in energy activity in the third quarter. I think the big change was in the outlook for the future. Back in the second quarter, oil prices had risen a bit, had risen from the 40s up to around 60. And so the majority of firms were expecting at least some stabilization or maybe growth in the second half of the year. And that, for the most part, went away in the third quarter. And now firms are expecting further declines heading forward related to the change in the oil price outlook.
So how has and how could this affect the job outlook?
I think it's probably not a great thing for the job outlook. Energy jobs have already fallen considerably this year, and that has spilled over to the overall state employment picture. So employment in Oklahoma has been falling since February and now is about 0.5% below its peak. So if energy firms are planning further reductions in activity heading forward, that probably means fewer energy jobs that could spill over to other jobs.
Could an uptick in any other of our business sectors, could it soften that blow?
It could. We actually did a report on that last quarter as well, looking at if energy is going to be on the sidelines for a while, as it appears that it might be. What other sectors are really important in Oklahoma? How are they doing, and what might their outlook be? And so some of those that we found as being especially important, one is the defense sector, the aerospace sector, has been was hit fairly hard by sequestration in recent years, but recently has been stabilizing. The aerospace sector has been helped by the move of some Boeing jobs to Oklahoma City around Tinker. So that sector has been at least stable. Other important sectors that have been doing, that are important are healthcare, has continued to add jobs throughout the state. That's been probably the biggest jobs adder, and that's, I think, to be expected as the population continues to age. There's more demand for healthcare services. And then another sector that's important in the state, more important than it used to be, is tourism. And that has done actually relatively well so far this year. I would think at some point that declining incomes as a result of problems in the energy sector would put a damper on that in terms of local use of tourism services, but visitors seem to be continuing to come to Oklahoma.
And while these are all certainly important jobs and important sectors of our economy, unfortunately, if the past is any indication, they don't pay what energy does.
That's certainly true in the tourism sector. In terms of healthcare, it varies. Obviously, there's very low-paid healthcare workers, there's very high-paid healthcare workers. In defense and aerospace, those would probably be on average above average paying jobs. So they have the potential to make up for some of those job losses we've seen in energy. But the problem is the growth in those sectors hasn't been as solid as the declines in the energy sector.
Any fears that this energy downturn could it echo the recession that we saw 2009, 2010?
I think that one was a little bit different because it was a worldwide financial crisis. It was a national recession, so there was a reduction in demand across the country. So other sectors of the economy, in addition to energy, were also facing difficulties. Housing, in particular, was hit very hard by that downturn. Manufacturing broadly was hurt by that downturn. Consumer spending was hurt. So far in Oklahoma, the main impact has been in the energy sector directly. There's been some spillover to parts of manufacturing. We've seen some weaker state sales tax revenue, but not to the degree and the breadth that we saw in that downturn.
Now, I know hindsight is always 20/20, but the past is a great predictor of the future. From an economic standpoint, is there anything that we could be doing better? Because inevitably, we're going to see this again.
Mm-hmm. I think we've actually done a better job in recent years, perhaps than we've done in decades past, in terms of seeking to find sectors or just diversify our economy beyond energy into things like segments of healthcare, defense and aerospace, tourism. The problem is that we have energy resources, so when prices are high, it's generally the highest paying sector. It's going to grow. So even though we wanted to diversify our economy, when energy prices are high and we have energy, that sector is going to become dominant again. But that said, as I mentioned, healthcare has been doing well. We have a bit more of a presence in aerospace and tourism than in the past. At the moment, it's not enough to make up for the size of the declines in the energy sector. But if we didn't have those sectors, if we hadn't focused some attention on those sectors, it could be even worse.
All right. Thank you so much, Chad. Chad Wilkerson is the executive of the Oklahoma City branch of the Federal Reserve Bank. Well, with the plunge in Oklahoma's oil and gas income and the resulting gross production tax revenue, Governor Mary Fallin has ordered state agency heads to cut non-essential expenses by 10% for the rest of the fiscal year and for the entirety of 2017. Now, a little later in our show, we'll take a closer look at what that downturn in energy prices could mean for everything from education to our state's roads and bridges. But when we return, a century of shaking.
You're watching Oklahoma Horizon, featuring some of the good things that are happening in the great state of Oklahoma.
Well, the link between earthquakes and Oklahoma's oil and gas industry may be nothing new. A report by the Seismological Society of America shows earthquakes dating back to the 1920s and long presumed naturally occurring were in fact due to wastewater and other fluids pumped underground. Findings are based on research extracted from county oil and gas records and suggest all but one of the major earthquakes in the 1950s were located close to an injection well site that was permitted prior to the shaking. This research comes at a time when there's growing concern about a flurry of quakes in the Cushing area. This small town is home to North America's largest commercial oil storage hub. And with more than a dozen quakes registering 3.0 or higher having hit there since September, some worry they could threaten our national security. That's because if the oil pipelines coming in or out of the storage hub in Cushing are damaged, that would not only disrupt how crude flows around the country, it would also impact financial markets and push prices upward. Now, so far, no damage has been reported by the companies that own the oil tanks, but state regulators with the Corporation Commission ordered injection wells within 3 miles to shut down and those within 6 miles to reduce the wastewater they pump underground by 25%. Commission spokesman Matt Skinner.
The fact that the Cushing Tank Farm is there, the largest tank farm in the United States, the largest tank farm in North America, and it is the place where all the New York Mercantile Exchange oil is stored. It is critical that we have authority to do what staff has done, and staff will continue in that mode until told otherwise.
Now, while recent evidence suggests oil and gas linked earthquakes are nothing new, university researchers, government officials, and the energy industry have all been reluctant to link earthquakes to a sector that is a major driver of our state's economy. Now, if you'd like to learn more about the Corporation Commission's role in regulating seismic activity, I do have a full interview with Corporation Commissioner Dana Murphy streaming on our website under our Value Added section.
Still to come on Oklahoma Horizon. Are Oklahoma's roads and bridges in for a rocky ride? But first, a big hole for lawmakers to fill.
Well, if you have any doubt of the economic impact of the energy industry, look no further than the state budget. When lawmakers reconvene next February, they'll be facing a budget hole of close to $1 billion thanks to a dramatic decline in tax receipts from oil and gas. And exactly what to do about that was the focus of a forum sponsored by the nonprofit group Oklahoma Watch. The forum featured Republican Speaker of the House Jeff Hickman and the House Democratic Minority Leader Scott Inman, and was moderated by the executive editor of Oklahoma Watch, David Fritzke.
Early predictions, I'll just start off saying, are a budget gap next fiscal year that could run anywhere from $600 million like last year to over $1 billion. In the meantime, our prisons are overcrowded. We're scrambling to put teachers in the classroom. We're trying to fix the foster care system. So I would like to ask Speaker Hickman, are we looking at hard times here?
Well, we are. And we are looking at hard times across the state. We have 10,000 Oklahomans who have been laid off in the last several months, particularly in the energy sector. The good news, you've seen the coverage lately, 85,000 jobs available in Oklahoma, but there's 10,000 people that work in the oil field at good salaries that are no longer employed, that are trying to figure out how to feed their families. And those are 10,000 taxpayers that are no longer remitting income tax every month out of those good paychecks. So the state does face challenges, but they're not unlike the challenges that many Oklahomans are facing in their family budgets, their personal budgets, or unlike what Oklahoma businesses go through each and every day as they make business decisions. The good news is, and what we're continuing to try to work through, is we don't have a revenue problem in Oklahoma. We have a budgeting problem in Oklahoma. Our shortfall last year was $611 million. I think it's likely to be more this year. I think it could be, $700 to $800 million. I'm not ready to and nobody knows at this point. They're all guesses. So for anyone to say it's going to be $1 billion, it's a guess. Could it be? Sure, it could be. But I don't think that I don't think I'm seeing anything right now that would lead me to believe that that's the case. But here's the real issue with our budget, and this is something that Representative Inman and I have looked at and worked on for many years, not always necessarily on the same side, but we've discussed it for many years. We have $3 billion every year of off-the-top money that doesn't come in for Representative Inman based on what his constituents tell him or what my constituents tell me or anybody that you elect to get to touch. It's called off-the-top money, earmarked money. And there's plenty of blame to go around because the Democrats put some of it in place when they were there, and we've added to it since we've been there. There's $3 billion there that doesn't come through the state budget process any longer. It automatically goes to agencies. And those are important programs. They're popular programs. There's a reason that they are there. But that's $3 billion that we've earmarked for certain things. So you take $3 billion off the table. There's another $1.7 billion in tax credits, incentives, and exemptions each and every year. Add that up, that's $4.7 billion that we don't have to work with, and you're talking about a budget hole this year of $611 million. We have some issues that we continue to need to work on. We made great progress this year on tax credits. We will finally have a system in place to evaluate tax credits. Every credit will be evaluated once every 4 years, so we will finally have the information that we've long needed to make educated decisions. But that's $4.7 billion that Scott Inman and his constituents, or Jeff Hickman and his constituents, or anyone else around the state who sent someone to the Capitol no longer has a say in how those dollars are spent in the state budget.
Representative Inman, what's your sense? How deep will this budget hole be, and what do you think the impact will be?
Well, that's a great question. I think the speaker hit it on the head. It's going to be big. It's more than likely will be bigger than the budget hole we had last year. But the impact of this particular budget year doesn't necessarily have any sort of outsized effect on what we've already seen the last 5 or 6 years. Because make no mistake about it, you'll hear excuse after excuse from some of the folks in power that says, well, the price of oil has gone down to $40-something a barrel, and therefore we must cut public education or higher education. Well, make no mistake about it, this legislature and this governor, when the price of oil was $100 a barrel, we cut public education funding deeper in Oklahoma than any other state in the nation when it was $100 a barrel, right? So what you have is you have a fiscal irresponsibility problem, coupled with the fact that I think what has come to fruition as we see what I like to call our core functions of government. The average agency in the state of Oklahoma, almost more than half of the agencies have seen 25, 30% cuts, some deeper than that over the last 5 or 6 years. You look at our 4 core functions of government, those being education, healthcare, public safety, and transportation, and you try to just look at what's happened in the last 5 or 6 years, and you realize when you've cut higher education funding, you've cut funding for Common Ed. Matter of fact, we're about $320 million below where we were in 2008 when you adjust for inflation. We've got hospitals on the verge of bankruptcy, and we refuse to bring our federal dollars home, refuse to properly fund them. You've had cuts to DOC, you've had cuts to DPS, and then just this year they decided to take $75 million out of the County Improvement for Roads and Bridges Fund that would have gone to help fund a lot of our county roads and bridges issues that were being washed out because of the floods. They took that money out of it, and you see what you've got is a fiscal irresponsibility problem that can be summed up in one phrase, in my opinion, and that is we are learning the painful and hard way that you cannot cut your way to prosperity.
Scott had some numbers there that were accurate and several that weren't. And the truth is, when you look at the education funding, if you go back since the recession started in 2008, you look at those numbers forward, he's right. The state appropriation for common education is off, but it's only off less than 2% compared to several other agencies that have been cut 20 to 30% of their budgets. Higher ed about 5%, career tech about 12%. So the rhetoric just doesn't match up on where the priorities have been put in place. The other thing that we have to do as those that are asked to govern is look at the entire picture. You know, the numbers that Representative Emmons is talking about is just the state appropriation, the part that goes through our process. There's also the House Bill 1017 fund, off the top money that goes to education. There's local property tax money. Everyone in the room probably has had an increase in their local property tax money and rarely has had a decrease each and every year. When you look at all of those numbers added up together, we have more money available to public schools today than we ever have in the history of our state. The problem that we have is it's not getting to the classroom. It's not getting into teacher salaries, and that's the issue that we're looking at is why do we have more money than we've ever had in K through 12 schools, and yet our numbers aren't where they need to be in teacher salaries, and we have these issues. And I think that's going to be a real focus this year is getting those dollars where they need to be, which is into the classroom.
What I struggle with is this. The solutions that are being proffered are more cuts. More cuts. When you say, well, we've got $3 billion in off-the-top money, so what is that saying to you? That's saying those monies go to OLAP, Oklahoma's Promise. They tried to cut that a couple of years ago. I asked the Attorney General for an opinion. They said you couldn't do that. But they tried to cut OLAP, Oklahoma's Promise, for middle-class and lower-middle-class families to go to college. There's money that goes into transportation funding because we did such an abysmal job. The Democrats did, I'll be honest with you, before I got there, did such an abysmal job of funding transportation and infrastructure, so that money's coming off the top. So the solution that you're hearing is this. We cut income taxes because those go into effect in January, and the way we're going to make up for those income tax cuts is we're going to cut more money out of OLAP and transportation funding and send it someplace else. We cannot, folks, we cannot continue to cut our way to prosperity. If you want to grow the state of Oklahoma, you got to invest in those core functions of government. That's why businesses want to come here. If you have poor schools, poor roads, poor health care, and poor public safety, companies won't come and they won't fill those jobs, and we'll continue to get what we've always got.
But what we can do is the journey we started last year on tax credits. It's continue to look at off-the-top money and look at reforms to get control of that $4.7 billion that this state doesn't have to spend in our budget every year because it's either earmarked directly to state agencies or it's been given away in credits and incentives and exemptions, some of which are beneficial to the state, others of which may be costing us more than the benefit returned to the state taxpayer.
Now, if you would like to see the entire evening of what was a lively and sometimes intense debate over the state budget, we do have a link under our value-added section to the Oklahoma Watch Forum. Want to share something you've seen here today? Well, all of our episodes are streaming on our YouTube channel at Oklahoma Horizon TV, or you can subscribe to our weekly free podcasts on iTunes. In 1984, the budget for the State Department of Transportation was roughly $200 million. 20 years later, it was the same, and our roads had fallen into some serious disrepair. So in 2005, the Oklahoma legislature approved a bill to create an off-the-top fund that would send tax dollars to the Transportation Department without going through the regular appropriations process at the state capitol. And it is this off-the-top money that has lawmakers eyeing it as the state faces one of the most severe budget challenges in recent years. So we asked Bobby Stem, the executive director of the Oklahoma Association of General Contractors, to tell us the benefits of funding our roads and bridges with off-the-top dollars. So Bobby, just how important is the construction industry to our state's economy?
It's huge. Not only does it very quickly put a tax dollar directly into the economy just by hiring contractors, but think about it, when you make a road bigger, wider, easier for folks, then things pop up around it, restaurants, shopping malls, etc. That's witnessed in what we've seen happen in South Edmond, North Oklahoma City, with the turnpike out there. It's booming, it gets bigger.
Roads are expensive to make.
That's right.
And I'm assuming it takes a lot of people to make these roads.
It does.
So knowing that, as we go forward, especially with the Department of Transportation and the tighter budgets that we're seeing, what does that mean?
Obviously, it becomes a little bit of a challenge because you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. But what I tell people is let's look at the overall picture. The overall picture is we're only spending about 4.7 to 4.8% of our entire state budget on roads and bridges, something that most Republicans have always said should be one of the 4 things state government does, but we're only spending 4.7, 4.8% of it. I think we could see some more progress, but in a tight budget year, we're just going to be happy to hold on what we have.
Now, the funding for our roads and bridges, how does that work?
3 different ways. It happens through about $400 million that comes in from the federal gas tax, about $200 million that comes in from the state gas tax, and a special fund called the Roads Fund, which is a cumulative deposit made from the state's general revenue fund. This year's deposit was about $470 million. It will cap out at $575 million, those 3 accounts.
So is the way that we fund our roads and bridges, is that different from other things in the state budget?
It is, there's no doubt. You have some gas tax revenues that are directly generating about 50% of our actual construction budget. And then you have a special fund that comes out of basically the general fund or income taxes, whatever it might be. And all of this comes off the top. Your state gas tax and your roads fund comes off the top. And that's what provides a long-term stability in the marketplace.
Let's talk about employment. What type of jobs are we talking about?
Oh gosh, your basic labor, the person that comes in and says, I've never done this before, but I'd like to, you're talking $12, $13, $14 an hour, all the way up to somebody who's a specialized equipment operator, might make $70 or $80 an hour. But everybody's involved in this business, from the bankers and the insurance people who bond these large projects, to the engineers who will then in turn around and plan the projects, to the laborer, flag person, bulldozer operator. It's pretty widespread, from professional, white collar to blue collar, out there just making it happen every day.
Yeah. So once I'm stuck in traffic on some road construction, should I feel a little bit better about it, knowing the economic impact it could have?
That's my hope. It is frustrating, there's no doubt. But what we tell people in these work zones is not only try not to become frustrated, pay attention, because what's happening is a car is zooming by these people at 60, 70 miles an hour through 2-3 feet away. That's their office space, right? And these are our fathers, brothers, uncles, aunts. Let's be careful when we're going through those work zones. It's a dangerous place.
Bobby Stem with AOGC. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And that off-the-top increase in funding has led to some significant infrastructure improvements around the state. Over $2 billion have gone into state roads and bridges since the program was started, along with another $1 billion to county roads and bridges. An idea that worked so well, others have tried to copy it. Now, in the coming weeks, we'll look at other areas around the state that could be affected by a state budget hole that keeps growing as the price of oil and gas remains low. You can keep up with us throughout the week. Just head to okhorizon.com, where you can see more of any of our stories, read our reporters behind the scenes blogs, see what others are saying about us on Twitter, and face the facts with our regular updates. So reach out and touch us anywhere and anytime. Next time on Oklahoma Horizon, we look at the skills gap and show you how you can avoid falling into it.
We want people that want to work, number one, that will show up on time and be problem solvers. That's the key. In small business, we have problems every day, just like big business. We've got to solve problems and people have to be creative.
Closing the skills gap on Oklahoma Show over the Heartland, Oklahoma Horizon. Finally today, a personal note. For the past 25 years, I've called Stillwater home. And like any great community, it's made up of great people, one of which lost his life at the tragedy at this year's homecoming parade. I had the privilege to work with Marv Stone when I was at Oklahoma State University. Not only was he a great scientist, he was also a good person. Now, if you'd like to see more on Marv's life, we have links to a tribute by Congressman Frank Lucas and another by our friends at Sunup. Marv Stone, his wife Bonnie, and all the victims will be missed.
Thank you for watching Oklahoma Horizon.